thank you for joining today's call. I hope you've been enjoying these last days of summer. We've got a great lineup for you today of both OSEP staff as well as staff from the Early Childhood Technical Assistance Center, ECTA. We'll be sharing for you the latest on preschool environments data, discipline guidance, and the importance of coordination and collaboration. ECTA will be sharing information about new tools and resources that they have to support the inclusive preschool education programs for children with disabilities, something that we all strive to try to promote. We have a lot to share, so I am not going to take any more time, and I will turn it over to Jennifer Barrett Zitkas, who we fondly know as JBC. Jennifer.
Thank you, Greg. We really appreciate you being here in this midsummer or late summer, as folks are either back to school, getting ready for school. Early intervention, of course, never stops. And we're really glad that you could make the time to be here. As you know, and in the link, we have the agency's equity plan related to Executive Order 13985. Inclusion is about equity. Special education is also about equity. And we want to make sure that we, as we're talking about it, we think about how important it is to this administration and our Secretary of Education. OSEP has also, along with the Office of Civil Rights, released a comprehensive guidance package to support children with disabilities to avoid discrimination. So please find that in the link as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. So as I point out, we have a big team, and I want to thank them for their time prior to. As you know, preparing it takes a lot of energy and time. So thank you to those that are on the call and those that are behind the scenes. OSEP, ECTA, and the NASD 619 Affinity Executive Council has been working together to understand the issues related to preschool special education Part B 619 of course, in improving outcomes for young children with disabilities. We're excited and we continue to collaborate, and we use the data that we have to inform decisions, as well as the input we have from stakeholders to continue to improve outcomes for all children and students. And while the focus of today's call is on IDEA 619, it's critical to have our partners, Part C coordinators on the call, as they support families and children when they transition from C to B. We do have, as Shoshana pointed out, a Q&A section. Feel free to add questions to the chat. We have a lot of information to share today, and we want to get to it. If for some reason we don't get to your question, we'll make sure to address it when we post this PowerPoint. The slides, as Shoshana said, will be available to you. And thank you again. And with no further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Jeanette. Thank you, Jeanette.
Thank you, JBZ, and thank you, Greg, for giving us this opportunity today to focus on preschool, and particularly preschool inclusion. It can sometimes feel like preschool 619 is sort of that middle child, often getting lost between Part C programs and Big B programs. So it's good to intentionally spotlight preschool because these first early experiences, school experiences, really set the tone for a child's and their parents' expectations about future school experiences. So good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you for being here today. Hope you're all enjoying this last bit of summer. It seems like all three of us now have said something about the end of summer, so maybe we're really wishing summer away. We do have a lot to get through, like JBZ said, and we really want to focus on the resources that the TA centers have to share with you. So we're going to move pretty quickly through our beginning slides to make sure we have ample time for that. We want to start with reminding everyone that Part B regulations require states to ensure that IDEA services are provided in the least restrictive environment. The LRE requirements have always been a fundamental element of the IDEA and reflect a strong preference for educating children with disabilities in regular classes. And LRE for preschoolers with a disability can be provided in a variety of settings, including public and private preschool programs, community-based childcare facilities, or even in the child's home. Again, want to just kind of remind you of the Dear Colleague letter of 2017, which was released to reaffirm our commitment to inclusive preschool education programs and to reiterate that the LRE requirements of the IDEA are fully applicable to the placement of preschool children with disabilities. It also includes additional information on the reporting of educational environments data and the use of IDEA Part B funds to provide special education and related services to preschool children with disabilities. So let's take a quick look at what those reporting requirements are. So preschool environments data are reported in Indicator 6 of states' APRs each year, as you know. It used to be called early childhood environments, but beginning with the FFY 2020 APR, it was changed to preschool environments because it's specifically reporting on children ages 3, 4, and 5 in preschool programs. Children who are 5 years old and in kindergarten are now only reported in Indicator B5 with school age environments data. This was in large part due to feedback and requests advocating of 619 coordinators and Part B data managers. So 6A looks at the number of 3, 4, and 5-year-olds with IEPs attending a regular early childhood program and receiving the majority of their special education services in that program. 6B then looks at those 3, 4, and 5-year-olds receiving their IEP services in a separate special education class, school, or residential facility. And then 6C, which was a new component to this indicator with the FFY 2020 APR submission, looks at those preschool age children receiving IEP services in their home. And I will say, we heard a lot from the field about concerns related to target setting and small N sizes as it relates particularly to 6C. In our APR reviews, we were pleased to see strong stakeholder engagement, especially in those states that were wrangling with the numbers that were low, but not necessarily hitting that, that threshold of less than 10, and wanting to be really thoughtful about individualized service setting decisions. So throughout the review process and internal discussions, we made an internal policy decision that the 6C in target would not need to reflect improvement over baseline. And this is in alignment with OSEP's longstanding position that in the case of like natural environments, indicator C2, resolution sessions and mediations, that targets should not drive a specific outcome. So as such, we will be updating the universal TA document to reflect this. Let's now take a quick look at our national indicator 6 data. This graphic, excuse me, this graphic shows the national data over time for indicator 6A represented in the green bars and 6B represented in the blue bars. And as you can see, there's not been much change, especially between fiscal years 2013 and 2019. That historical data, as you know, includes 5-year-olds who might have been in kindergarten. Last year for FFY 2019 reporting, states had an option to remove those 5-year-olds in kindergarten from their early childhood environments data. And we did have 22 states that did so. So I've put sort of just a dotted line in there between the 1819 and 1920 years to note that this begins kind of a mixed set of data. And then there's a solid line before the 2021 because with the FFY 2020 APR, OSEP required all states to report 5-year-olds in kindergarten in indicator 5 data rather than indicator 6. So this will become our new baseline year for preschool environments. But note that FFY 2020 data reflects a 4 to 5 percentage point decrease of children enrolled in early childhood settings and roughly the same percent of increase of children receiving their special education services in those separate settings. With the 5-year-olds kindergartners removed from this data set, it gives us a more accurate picture of preschool environments data and shows us we still have work to do. I mean, I would love to dig deeper into this with you, but as you've heard us say, we're really limited on time today. There are going to be sessions related to this data at the IDIO conference in a couple of weeks, which you'll hear about. So I encourage you to participate in those. But the concerning overarching trend, I think, is that we've been talking about increasing meaningful, inclusive opportunities for all children for decades, and yet our data has remained mostly unchanged. So again, really quickly, let's talk about what is happening at the state level that impacts this. Next slide, please. We know that under general supervision requirements, that the SEA is responsible for ensuring that IDEA is carried out, that there are established policies and procedures for monitoring and enforcement activities, including ensuring that LRE requirements are implemented by each LEA. So how does our LRE data inform that work? The research is clear. High quality inclusion benefits everyone, and yet we've done very little to change practice and improve outcomes related to inclusion. At the state level, you have the authority to shape organizational and leadership factors that either promote or even challenge successful implementation of policies and practices that prioritize early childhood inclusion. It isn't enough to just train personnel. There must be true system shifts that enable implementation of best and recommended practices with accountability measures at all levels. This includes looking at disaggregated and cross-indicator data relationships to inform improvement cycles. For example, what do we know about equity and disparities in preschool LRE data? What do you know about your own preschool LRE data? How does preschool LRE data compare to your early childhood outcome data? Are outcomes data impacted by the child's placement? And how do you know? How are preschoolers reflected in your disproportionality data? We know that some states are beginning to really dig into their data to answer these questions, and that's really exciting. We also know some of you are either already or beginning to talk about using preschool LRE data in your local determinations. These types of activities show the priority that some states are giving to early childhood inclusion. And we would be remiss if we didn't at least touch upon how discipline practices potentially impact placement decisions. JBZ referenced the new discipline guidance package earlier that was recently released. And now I'd like to welcome and thank my colleague Kim Himes to talk with us a little more about that, specifically as it relates to preschool programs. So I am handing it over to you, Kim.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Jeanette, and hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with you about the new discipline guidance package that was released just a couple of weeks ago on July 19th. This is the most comprehensive guidance package addressing discipline and behavioral related provisions of IDEA that the department has released in over a decade. So we're very excited to put this information out for you to review. The guidance package consists of three main documents. The first is a Dear Colleague letter written by our OSEP director, Valerie Williams. The second document is a question and answer resource that is very comprehensive and lengthy, which outlines 12 topic areas related to IDEA's discipline provisions. And the last document that we released is a technical assistance resource titled Positive Proactive Approaches to Supporting Children with Disabilities, a Guide for Stakeholders. You can find all of these documents on the idea.ed.gov website following the navigation path that's for you here on the screen. In addition to the documents, you will also find a video on this website that provides you with a much more lengthy and comprehensive overview of the three documents. Unfortunately, of course, we won't be able to go through them in depth today, but I did want to make sure that you were aware of where you could find them for your own reading. And then, of course, if you have any questions or issues that you would like to talk about with OSEP, you should feel free to reach out to your OSEP state lead to have those discussions. However, while we are here today, I did want to highlight the challenge that is before us and how these documents can help support your efforts in improving outcomes for preschool children with disabilities. So next slide, please. Great, thank you. So of course, when we look at any issue, the first thing we always look at is what is the data telling us, right? And so the data, as you can see on this slide, is grim for preschool students with disabilities, in that when we look at the when we look at and we see 22.7% of the total preschool population consists of children with disabilities, as compared to 56.9% of preschool children with disabilities who were expelled. We can see that there are some disparities here in how preschool children with disabilities are faring in their preschool settings. Unfortunately, these trends start in preschool, but we see them consistently throughout high school, and they're even more pronounced for children with disabilities of color. So, you know, these data trends make us stop and think about what do we need to do to make some change. And that was one of the motivating factors for creating the discipline and behavior guidance package. Next slide, please. Thank you. So with our very limited time today, I just wanted to pull out a couple of key areas that we wanted to make you aware of that are included in the guidance package. The first topic that I'll talk about are related to the Q&A document. So as you review this document, it's important for you to remember that preschool students who are attending public programs, whether they are operated by an LEA or another public agency, or whether we're talking about children who are placed in a private preschool program by the LEA, these children receive IDEA's discipline protections. The Q&A does a very, very thorough job of laying out IDEA's discipline requirements. But given our short time today, I just wanted to pull out a couple of new items that I thought you might be interested in learning more about. First, the Q&A describes and defines the term exclusionary discipline. The full definition is available to you in this document, but essentially what we are referring to here is the removal of a child from their class, school, or other educational program or activity for violating a school rule or code of conduct for a short-term or long-term basis. Additionally, the Q&A defines and describes another term, informal removal. And again, the full definition can be found in the Q&A, but essentially here we are referring to the action of excluding a child for a part or all of a school day, even for an indefinite period of time, without invoking IDEA's disciplinary procedures. Informal removals are subject to IDEA's requirements. So we know that informal removals are a very real occurrence for children with disabilities across all ages. We have heard many stories from parents who get phone calls during the school day asking them to come and pick up their child because their child is having some behavioral challenges. And this guidance really puts a name to these occurrences and clarifies how they may be considered within IDEA's discipline requirements. So again, this is more fully explained in the Q&A document. Before we go on to the next slide, I did want to call your attention to the information that's provided in the parentheses. You will see a letter and a number. The letter refers to where in the Q&A document you can find this topic area, and then the number is the corresponding question that is specific to the information that's provided here. So I just wanted to kind of let you know that we tried to pull out that information for you so you weren't hunting around everywhere. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what can we do? This is where OSEP's TA document comes in. So we really wanted to make sure that we were providing not only the IDEA requirements of what discipline and behavioral provisions are in IDEA, but also a technical assistance guide for practitioners to use to really figure out what can we do to improve and make changes to systems and processes that we know need to be, we need to shift towards a more preventative and proactive approach. And that's where our TA guide comes in. So the TA guide really draws upon the expertise of our OSEP TA funded centers to help all stakeholders explore steps, and we kind of next steps and how they should think about making these improvements. And we categorize these improvements in the 4 areas that you see here. We know that for some of your preschool programs, these initiatives are already underway, and for others, this may be an opportunity for a fresh start. Either way, our goal with this TA document is to connect you with relevant evidence-based resources that, while they are not required by law, can support you in creating or enhancing policies, practices, and procedures. The TA document highlights a variety of OSEP TA centers, as I mentioned, but I wanted to pull out one here today for this audience, which is the National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with the NCPMI's resources, but we did want to make sure that we are connecting the field with the resources that NCPMI produces, because not only do they provide content for state level, local level, but really practitioner level resources as well. So we wanted to make sure that we drew that out for you here today. And lastly, this is a very quick, very brief overview of what is in this discipline package. I hope this gives you some highlights and next steps for you to go and look at the website and look at the resources and watch the video. Thank you so much for everything that you do every day to help children thrive and support their families. And with that, I will turn it over to Jarma, who will discuss coordination and collaboration.
Thank you, Kim. I would like to take this time to share with you briefly the importance of coordination and collaboration. We all know that effective communication, coordination, and ultimately collaboration are key to building and sustaining inclusive, high-quality early childhood systems that value and have high expectations for all preschool children. While there are many different early childhood programs that preschoolers may be participating in, for the purposes of today's call, we're going to focus our attention on ED's partnership with Head Start. So most of you are aware of the 2015 Joint ED and HHS policy statement on inclusion of children with disabilities in early childhood programs that outlines the requirements and the expectations for inclusive opportunities for preschoolers. Although these requirements and expectations have not changed, our departments are currently in the process of revising the policy statement in response to the input from stakeholders. Therefore, you'll be hearing more about the department's efforts to support this work in the upcoming months. So we'd like you to stay tuned. Next slide, please. So the 10% enrollment requirement, I'm going to spotlight this just for a minute. As you may well know, Head Start has a minimum 10% enrollment requirement, which is mandated. And the Head Start program standards 1302.14b requires that each Head Start grantee must include a minimum of 10% of all of its enrollment slots be occupied by children with disabilities. And what's good about this requirement is that it helps ensures programs recruit children who are already identified as eligible for IDEA services prior to their entry into Head Start or Early Head Start, and that they accurately screen and refer them for evaluation for any child who may benefit from early intervention, special education, or related services. And because of this requirement, one of the things I wanted to point out was that the fact of the SEAs and LEAs get an opportunity to get in the door and provide these IEP services to children in the Head Start classrooms. I believe I'm on to the next slide. So some of the challenges that we're hearing in the field from our partners, we know already that it's no easy task to coordinate and collaborate across the programs with different requirements, even when we have the same goal of supporting young children to thrive and be successful in school and later in life. There have been long-standing issues that SEAs and LEAs and Head Start have faced throughout the years, and the pandemic has only exacerbated it. Our partners in Head Start shared with us and provided these reports of some of those challenges. The first being shortages of qualified personnel. All early childhood professions have made it challenging to meet the needs of children with disabilities. The other is delays in referrals and evaluations, which happens for many reasons, including family reasons where parents may not want to sign or consent to having their child evaluated, but often delays certainly increased over time. And since the pandemic, everyone was challenged to provide services in different and varying methods and in locations. There are reports of low enrollment with concerns due to IEP placements. There are also some issues around or challenges around some Head Start programs reporting the fact that districts were requiring services to be provided in the public school classrooms rather than in the Head Start classrooms. So which also had potential impact on Head Start enrollment and the provision of FAPE. So what we've done in OSEP and Head Start as a response, we have begun to look at the information we've received from the federal level as generally anecdotal information. We know that the local Head Start programs have their own specific data and that the SEAs and the LEAs should be reviewing and analyzing and working together as with the data that they're received collaboratively in order to improve outcomes for students with disabilities. So our response to these concerns and issues have been that the department has been hearing what the field has said. OSEP and Head Start are issuing a joint letter that speaks to ensuring the provision of IDEA services in Head Start classrooms for starters. As a companion to that letter, we're also releasing a new resource that provides guidance on developing formal collaborative partnerships through MOUs. Again, this MOU guidance uses Head Start as an example, but the intent is that it can be applied to any early childhood partnership. These resources will be forthcoming this month, and we'd like you to stay tuned for those as well. So up next, and like I said, we all have been sharing that the sound bites that we're sharing today are very brief in nature. So we're going to turn this over to our TA centers for more new and exciting resources. So I'm going to chair on Katasha and ask her just to take it away.
Thank you so much. We are so grateful and excited to have the opportunity to share on this important topic. So we appreciate it. Thank you. I'm here, Katasha Williams from ECTA, along with my colleagues, which you'll hear from a little bit later, Alyssa and Debbie. So, you know, the work, and we can move to the next slide. The work of our ECTA Center is to really support Part C and Section 619 programs in their development of early intervention and preschool special education service systems. That is our work. But the ultimate mission, the goal of our work is to enhance outcomes for young children with disabilities and our families. So one of our key priorities that we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about today is that of early childhood inclusion. Not only is the research clear, you shared that with us earlier at the top of the hour, children in inclusive settings, we know they receive greater gains in areas of development, including cognitive and communication, that the research tells us and supports the need for inclusion. We also know that children without disabilities also benefit as well. And not only is it the research and our belief that this is the best for children, this work is also supported. Our center's work is supported by by a few things, but one of which is the executive order on advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities. And this was an order signed on President Biden's first day in office and really was intended to create an initiative to promote diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. So really supports the work of our key initiative here, one of our key initiatives. And then there's the data, and Jeanette walked us through the data that are reported, and we have OSEP facts over the years. But the data is what is telling in all of this. The data is clear. The data are clear that although we know what the research says, the data tells us that there's been very little movement over decades, over the course of time when it comes to serving children in inclusive settings. And even more telling than that, looking at these data, When we start to examine the data from an equity mindset, it's even more telling in that space as well. So as a center, we believe that it's impossible to think about high quality without also thinking about and addressing equity. We also know that it's not simply enough for children to be placed in a setting without adequate supports for the children, the families, and the practitioners as well. So what we would like to take the bottom half of this hour to do is to really start to share with you and walk through some related resources that our center has developed. Alyssa will start us off with a review of our cross-collaborative efforts around the indicators of high quality inclusion. And then Debbie will follow by sharing some tools and resources related to making sound preschool LRE decisions and some key actions within the IEP process. So I will stop now and let Alyssa begin with our resource walkthrough. Alyssa?
Thanks so much, Katasha. And again, thank you to OSEP for hosting us today. The first resource that I want to share with you, as Katasha mentioned, is the indicators of high quality inclusion. In our work with states over the years, we have learned that states and communities and local programs need guidance in how to ensure that early childhood inclusion is being implemented for all children and families. The suite of indicators were developed by ECTA and the National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations. The suite of indicators describe what should happen at each level of the system to ensure inclusion. The development of the indicators start with the value that children be included in the settings that they would naturally be in if they were not diagnosed with a disability. So we encourage partnerships across preschool, Head Start, and childcare. The next image you see on the screen here is an actual screen grab of the indicators of high quality inclusion. You can see the 4 levels there. There are state indicators, community indicators, local program indicators, and environment indicators. Each of the different levels represented here, underneath them has some indicators that talk about what should happen at each level of the system. Within those indicators are also elements which operationalize how inclusion can be implemented in a high quality way. When you explore this resource, you will see that the list of indicators across the levels and in their operationalized way are comprehensive. But I am reminded every day in working with states and programs and providers that it is a privilege to implement high quality inclusion and support all children and families who enter our doors. In the next portion of the slide, you'll see the essential structures of statewide implementation. And these were developed from implementation science. The structures include state leadership teams, a statewide network of implementation coaches who support programs, the communities themselves that work at a local level of policy and process, and then you can see the implementation programs themselves. If you click again, you'll see those listed out, and you can see that all of those different levels are driven by data and evaluation. What's happening and how do we know it's effective, and who do we know that it's effective for? When we work with states on implementing high quality inclusion, we support them in developing these structures within their state systems. Finally, this last image and live link is the indicators were developed with a long list of partners, and that national partners link should be active. Our partners included the Department of Education, as well as HHS, Head Start, childcare, family childcare, other TA centers, and early childhood professional organizations, just to name a few. The next slide, developed by our partners, not by us at ECTA, shows the relationship between implementation and improvement science. On the left, you will see the features of implementation science shared with improvement science. And if you look at those 6 boxes, you can see that these are the features we use in our technical assistance with states that are implementing the inclusion indicators. So for example, we really work on supporting implementing inclusion in small and varied contexts. We provide tools and resources for database decision-making, and we support states to make sure that they have a maintained focus on practitioner and child needs. Also in the inclusion indicators, we think about the state, community, and local program indicators as those most closely associated with implementation. The environment indicators, or those early childhood education environment indicators, are most closely tied to improvement science, as they are the indicators which are the actual evidence-based practices that are implemented by providers and caregivers working directly with children. So this next slide gives you an idea of the content of each of the set of indicators. The first, what you'll see there, if you click into the circles, is that the state indicators are focused on state level infrastructure and supports. The community indicators support communities to develop a culture of inclusion across programs. So how does this happen with our partners in preschool, in public preschool, in Head Start, and in childcare? The local program indicators inform administrators and staff on the policies and procedures that support inclusion of all children with disabilities at the program level. So here's enrollment procedures, licensing, all of those sorts of things. The ECEE, or the Early Care and Education Environment Indicators, are the evidence-based practices tied to support children's developmental outcomes, as well as their sense of belonging in a larger community and the cultivation of meaningful relationships with peers that last the lifetime. What we've learned is in implementation with states is while it looks like the arrows are going in a single direction, each level of the system works bidirectionally to inform all of those other system levels. So what providers are saying help to inform what local programs need to do, and what local programs and communities are doing inform what states need to think about. So this next slide is very early data from some of the states that we've worked with over the last few years through the pandemic. As you can see, on the left, you'll see some district data that is in one of our implementing communities. And what you can see there is a very significant increase in the number of children who are receiving services in an inclusive environment. In another state where we're working in, we saw similar results within the communities. And you can see that LRE in one of those went from 18 to 28% in 1 year, which is very powerful, especially considering what we've seen with the pandemic. But also communities and programs have built public awareness campaigns. They have figured out structures to incentivize providers. They've done joint professional development and coaching with our childcare partners. And there's a lot more effort toward cross-sector professional development, including coaching and training. Finally, in this last slide that I have, the ECTA, as Katasha said, and our partners and our work are committed and to learning more about the indicators and how they work in states. And as is the case with all of our deliverables and all of our technical assistance, we are looking to understand how racial equity is addressed in the indicators and how we can support movement on some of those data that Jeanette and Katasha shared. We are working with our partners at the Children's Equity Project to help us audit the indicators themselves, as well as the materials that we have created with states for implementation. So we look forward to sharing more exciting information on what's happening with the inclusion indicators, as well as some powerful outcomes. So please stay tuned. I'm going to turn it over now to my colleague, Debbie Kate from ECTA, to share a few more resources.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. I'm very excited to share with you some key resources from ECTA and our partners. There are many important collaboration considerations critical to supporting early childhood inclusion. One is working collaboratively across the early childhood community to expand access to seats or slots in high-quality early childhood programs for young children with disabilities, as Katasha and Alyssa just shared. In addition, it's equally important that districts are following the IDEA Part B least restrictive environment regulations and processes. Making sound and equitable preschool LRE decisions is a suite of tools for IEP teams, districts, states, and families to promote quality LRE discussions and decisions for each and every preschool child. The actions in the process contain a link to the requirements, related agreed upon early childhood principles, as well as relevant guidance and resources. And on the slide, you'll see just a snippet from action number 8. The tool is not meant to be an IEP primer, rather it's meant to lay the foundation for the IEP sections that are really critical to making those sound LRE decisions. The tool also contains a list of guiding questions for consideration by IEP teams as LRE options are discussed. Let's look at the next slide and look a little bit more deeply into the suite of tools. Personnel development tools included an effective IEP process action review. State and local administrators are understandably reluctant to question individual IEP team decisions, though it's really important to follow the data and provide training and guidance where needed. We can and should be monitoring the processes that IEP teams are following as they make their decisions. For example, are supplementary aids and services needed to support a child in a regular early childhood environment part of the conversation for each and every child's IEP? Is it a consideration before placement determinations are made? The action review document can be used as both a training activity and as a tool for monitoring IEP processes. Additionally, you'll find suggested activities that can be used with large and small groups, either virtually or in person, to provide activities that will support the actions in the IEP process, the attitudes and beliefs that folks have, and in gaining an understanding of what's required to make sound and equitable LRE decisions. These are not prescriptive activities. They're activities that can be used in a variety of ways and can be customized by both the state and local partners that may be using them. They can be used, for example, as just a chat question on a webinar, or they can be expanded if you have the opportunity to do these activities in virtual or in-person, more in-depth trainings. On the next slide, you'll see another companion tool, the LRE reference points and discussion prompts. This is a companion document to the suite of tools in the Making Sound Preschool LRE Decisions. This quick reference guide organizes information on topics related to preschool LRE in one place and can be used as a training tool. It's intended for use by practitioners, families, districts, and states. The tool is organized in 5 sections. It includes information about the IDEA mandate, LRE requirements, regular early childhood programs, funding IDEA preschool services, and accountability. Let's look on the next slide, a little more depth around this program. Looking closely at the regular early childhood program section, you'll see that there are a list of topical pieces. Each topic expands to show regulations and guidance in that particular area. This section begins with the definition of what an regular early childhood program is. The definition was contained in the Office of Special Ed and Rehabilitation Services Dear Colleague letter on Preschool LRE. It incorporates additional guidance on the topic from U.S. Department of Ed, the Office of Special Education Programs, and other resources. So the key to this tool is that you can find everything on the particular topic organized in one place for a quick reference. Each topic has questions to facilitate an understanding of the guidance provided at the national level in IDEA by an individual state or by a local district. In addition to being a quick reference guide, reference points and discussion prompts can be used for the creation of state and local guidance where it might be needed. Let's look at the next slide, please. 619 coordinators and Head Start collaboration directors are currently engaged in quarterly calls. It became apparent during those collaborative calls that the process for referring young children with suspected disabilities for evaluation for special education was not always clear. States and local districts have variations of the specific processes to accept referrals and obtain parental consent for evaluation. To help provide information and better understanding of state and local processes, a work group of Head Start collaboration directors, 619 coordinators, and a representative from the parent centers created a flyer and customizable template that can be used in a variety of settings and in a variety of ways. Referring a preschool child with a suspected disability or delay for evaluation for special education contains general information on how to refer a child aged 3 through 5 to the local public school and includes information on locating state parent training and information centers specific to the state that's providing the guidance. States, local districts, and community partners may customize the flyer by adding state-specific content and contact information for local programs. The tool is intended for use by families. It can be used generically as a flyer. It can be used by any collaborating partners and customized to show the folks that have worked together to create the best guidance possible for their community. On the next slide, you'll see another initiative that we've been working on with our partners. Part C and Part B 619 coordinator turnover is very high across the country. OSEP and the OSEP-funded Early Childhood Technical Assistance Centers, in collaboration with representatives from State Part C and Part B 619 coordinators, both seasoned and new, the Infant Toddlers Coordinators Association, the National Association of State Directors of Special Education 619 Affinity Group, and Parent Center representatives created information and a process to provide important introductory information to new coordinators. The web page provides foundational materials and resources as part of a process to orient Part C and 619 coordinators to their new roles. The process includes a welcome letter, orientation conference calls, and an introduction to technical assistance partners. An orientation video has been developed and is shared with new coordinators as they enter their roles. The webpage is currently being updated and the new version will soon be revealed. Please join the Early Childhood TA Centers in welcoming all our new Part C and 619 coordinators. And finally, on the next slide, we haven't had as much time as we'd like to share all the information we have, but we know that many of you will be at the Improving Data, Improving Outcomes Conference coming up August 21st through the 26th in Washington, D.C. Here's a list of a variety of the sessions on inclusion, and there are even more than these. We look forward to seeing you at the conference. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to share a reminder to look forward to the spring to information about the National Early Childhood Inclusion Institute, hosted by the Frank Porter Graham Child Development Center. The Institute occurs in the spring and has become one of the premier educational opportunities for anyone involved in the care and education of young children. We very much appreciate this opportunity to share some of the tools that we have with you. We look forward to seeing those of you who will be at the IDIO conference, the Inclusion Conference in the spring, and all the Early Childhood TA Centers welcome your questions. Please let us know if you'd like to see more of the resources. We'd be happy to give you more information about how these resources can be used and customized within your states. And thank you again for having us today, Jennifer, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Great, thank you so much. Any questions? I saw one pop up. One thing I want to ask our TA providers is, how would a state access TA on this area or any other areas?
Jennifer, I can respond to that.
Great.
We have a couple of different ways in which states can participate in TA that's offered through ECTA. And the first would be that we put out applications when we have TA around TA availability around inclusion. And that can be in a targeted form as well as in an intensive form. So ECTI offers support universally to all states. But if you want more targeted supports or more intensive supports, there's an application process for the TA that we have. That's what we have done in the past. We look forward in the future to doing similar work if we're given that opportunity.
Great. We'll get a shout out, which is always nice to hear, from North Dakota, saying thank you to ECTA. And they've been a great wealth of support. I have to say, all of our TA centers have put a great deal of effort in supporting our states, and we really appreciate that. Any additional questions? Here we go. Thank you for, okay, we don't know what we do without the, I think she meant do without, but we would agree. Thank you so much, Delaware. If you'd like to move to, I think it is, Delaware is very supportive, wonderful resources. Tennessee's thanking you. That's great. Could you go to the next slide, please? We have included a number of the resources we've mentioned, along with fast facts, the high quality indicators. While we've touched on so many things, there's always a place to go back. In fact, if you have a question, you can reach back to any of the presenters here today, or you could reach out to your state lead. We have, if you go to the next slide, if you would. Great. Again, these are all some really great resources. Do know that there are resources that we weren't able to add, and one of which was presented most recently, which is the 619 Child Find Self-Assessment, as well as its early version with Part C Child Find. We're looking forward to seeing everyone. I know that this is a lot, but we continue to hope to have these conversations with both 619, Part B, special ed directors, as well as our Part C coordinators, and we continue to look towards other topics that may be of interest. So thank you again. I'll do one more check. I want to thank Greg Core for his time and attention today, as well as those that have presented and those that have been behind the scenes. Thank you, everyone. Please enjoy the rest of your summer. And for those of you that will be at IDIO or the DEC conference, I look forward to seeing you there as well. Thank you and have a great day.